Hey guys, today we're going way back to the 1920s, to the golden era of land speed racing, when British gentlemen racers like Malcolm Campbell and Henry Segrave owned the record. This episode, though, isn't about those speed legends, those motorsport giants. We're going to be looking instead at a man in the shadows, a mechanic, a guy who worked on a land speed car, who got a chance to get behind the wheel and take a shot at land speed glory himself. Today, we're going to be looking at the story of Lee Bible. As always, before we get going, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so. And I'd really appreciate it if you'd give this video a like. That'll give it a boost with YouTube's algorithm, and hopefully land speed legends will be recommended to more people. Thanks. In the 1920s, like today, the land speed record was dominated by the British. They had set a number of their records on a stretch of beach in Wales called Pendine Sands. That was the British mecca of ultimate speed. But it had its limits. So the Brits started heading across the Atlantic to make their runs, to Florida's Daytona Beach. Henry Segrave was the first British contender to run there. On March 29, 1927, he reclaims the record from fellow Briton Malcolm Campbell, pushing his Sunbeam Racer to 203 miles per hour and becoming the first man to break 200. Segrave gets a knighthood for that. From now on, he's Sir Henry Segrave. Campbell shows up at Daytona the next year, February 1928, and does 2:06 in his Bluebird Racer to win back the record. Okay, so now it's 2 months later, April 1928. An American contender shows up at Daytona. His name is Ray Keech, an up-and-coming race car driver, mainly on circular dirt tracks. The car he's going to drive at Daytona, well, actually, it's not Keech's car. He's just been hired to drive it. It's the brainchild of a Philadelphia wire manufacturer named James H. White, and it's called the White Triplex, or Triplex Special. Why Triplex? Because it has 3 engines, 1 in the front, 2 in the rear. We're talking 27-liter V12 Liberty engines, World War I aircraft engines. So altogether, that's 36 cylinders and 81 liters of displacement. The Triplex is a 4.5-ton monster. See, that was Jim White's thing. That was his theory about speed. That the design of a car, fancy streamlining, it didn't really matter. If you wanted to go fast, it was all about brute power. Now, you're probably wondering, what the heck is that extra set of wheels on the back? Well, the American Automobile Association, the AAA, governed speed trials back in the 20s at Daytona. And one of their rules was that a car had to be able to move in reverse. Otherwise, it wasn't a car, and they wouldn't give it their sanction. So that's what those extra wheels were for. They could be dropped down to demonstrate that the car could move in reverse. After that, they were taken off for the record attempt. Ray Keech, not surprisingly, he had a healthy fear of Jim White's Triplex Special. It was hard not to feel that the car wanted to kill him. On Keech's first run, a radiator hose came loose and scalded him. On his second run, flames shot out the front engine and burned his arm. He gutted it out, though, and managed to squeak by Malcolm Campbell's record. On April 22, 1928, Ray Keech pushes the Triplex to 207.55 miles per hour to win the land speed record for the United States. Keech held the record for just under 11 months. In March of the following year, 1929, Henry Segrave returned to Daytona Beach with a new car, the Golden Arrow, and blew Keech's record to smithereens. Segrave goes 231 miles per hour. It's the biggest jump in the land speed record up to that time. Okay, so finally, here's where Lee Bible enters the picture. His full name, Conway Lee Bible. Nickname, Connie. He was originally from Tennessee, the son of a farmer. After leaving home, Lee worked on the railroad, then was a telephone lineman, then he spent a stretch in a factory assembling cars. In around 1924, he moved to Daytona Beach and opened a garage. The garage where Jim White kept the Triplex Special 4 years later. Lee Bible was the mechanic who worked on the car. He was the guy in the greasy overalls in the background, looking on as Ray Keech took all the cheers. Lee saw firsthand how breaking the land speed record transformed Keech from a relative nobody into a star, with all kinds of opportunities opening up. Lee wanted that for himself. He wanted to make it big too, build a better life for his wife Annie and their 2 kids. Because they weren't doing so well, Lee was struggling with his garage. He could barely get by. So he tells Jim White that if he ever plans to run the Triplex again, he'd love the chance to drive it. Now, it's March 1929. Jim White and his Triplex Special have just lost the land speed record to Henry Segrave. And Jim wants it back. So he goes to Ray Keech, asks him to drive the Triplex again to win back the record. But Keech says no. He's not going to get behind the wheel of that car again. The thing is just too dangerous. So Jim White turns to Lee Bible. He asks Lee if he still wants to drive the Triplex. Lee says yes. He actually has no real experience with high-speed, straightaway racing. He's done a little racing on circular dirt tracks at county fairs, but that's it. But hey, that's how Ray Keech started out too, dirt tracks and county fairs, and look where he was now. And now the door was opening for Lee, a golden opportunity to win fame and glory. That's what Lee called it, a golden opportunity. Lee takes his first practice runs in the Triplex on March 12th, 1929, the day after Henry Segrave sets his 231 mile-per-hour record. Lee has to demonstrate to the AAA that he's a qualified driver before they'll sanction a record attempt. And he does. He hits 190 miles per hour. Phenomenal considering that he has no high-speed experience whatsoever. He spends the rest of the day working on the car, getting it ready. Tomorrow, he's going for the record. Okay, March 13th, 1929. The dunes lining Daytona are crowded for miles with 20,000 spectators, some of them no more than 50 yards back from the course. Lee's wife Annie is among them. So is Henry Segrave. He's planning on making another record attempt later in the day to see if he can push his Golden Arrow to 240 after Lee makes his runs. Lee's first pass, heading south on the 9-mile-long stretch of beach, is clocked at 186 miles per hour, not quite as fast as he went the day before in his qualifier. He confers with Jim White, smokes a cigarette to steady his nerves, then roars off on his return run, heading north. This time he's clocked at 2:02, but something goes wrong. Witnesses say the Triplex veered out toward the water and went out of control when Lee swerved back too sharply. Others speculated that Lee took his foot off the gas too fast, and that put the car into a skid. Whatever the cause, the Triplex became airborne and barrel rolled down the beach, crushing a newsreel cameraman named Charles Traub as it went. Traub had set up his camera at the end of the course because he was sure Lee Bible was going to crash when he took his foot off the gas, and he wanted to get it on film. He did, but it cost him his life. The hurtling Triplex pulverized Traub, cut him in half, and kept on going. Lee Bible was thrown from his seat just before the wreck came to rest at the base of the dunes. He tried to sit up, then fell back, dead. It took several minutes for the news of the crash to reach the main crowd of spectators at mid-course. Lee's wife Annie became hysterical when she heard. Jim White was equally devastated. He was so distraught at Lee Bible's death that he had to be physically helped back to his hotel and went into seclusion, vowing that he was through forever with racing. That was it for land speed racing on Daytona Beach for a while. Henry Segrave called off his planned record attempt and returned to England. He never tried for the land speed record again. As for Ray Keech, he was quoted in the papers the next day saying, "Lee Bible never had a chance. He was just a grease monkey who wanted to be a hero." Ray would go on to win the Indianapolis 500 later that spring and take home a purse of $31,000. A few days later, racing at Altoona, he was killed. I'm Sam Hawley. See you next time.